Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof for the 30th of April 2024. We're going to have a geopolitical smorgasbord of topics, or a smorgasbord of geopolitical topics. Who knows how to speak? Certainly not me. We're going to start with JAM, and by that I mean GPS. So, Lithuania's foreign minister said Russian GPS jamming of commercial flights is, quote, too dangerous to ignore. Russia has been accused of jamming GPS signals in nearby countries such as Finland as far back as the 2010s, but incidents have skyrocketed in the recent months, particularly over the Baltic Sea. Baltic foreign ministers have sounded the alarm after it was revealed that two Finnish aircraft were forced to turn around mid-journey in recent days. So, quote, Finnair will suspend its daily flights to Tartu, Estonia, from April the 29th to May the 31st. So, an alternative approach solution that doesn't require a GPS signal can be put in place at Tartu Airport. This is absolutely disgraceful, right? So Russia seems to be doing this from, well, as Marcus Jonsson here says, the GPS jammer affecting aircraft around Estonia is located in Russia, so not actually in Kaliningrad, about halfway to St. Petersburg from Narva, Estonia. This is shown by plotting the highest density of intersecting radio horizons of jammed aircraft on the map. Further, a drone-based method supports it. There's Estonia at the top of the three Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. I think this is terrible, right? So what do you do about a country that negatively impacts your country within your borders by using things that stretch across your borders? If they are stopping functionality in your country, that is equivalent, in my opinion, especially if they're doing it purposefully and they're not stopping doing it if you ask them to stop it, that's functionally the same as dropping a bomb on something so that that thing doesn't work, right? So if you have an airport where you can't functionally use the airplanes, so the airplanes are grounded, that's the same as bombing the airport, assuming there are no deaths involved in either. Like, there's no difference functionally between those two things, yet one is not seen as war and the other one is. I think this is a much, much bigger problem than I believe it's being interpreted as. I really do. And I think Russia needs to answer for all the crap it does that is completely unacceptable. Marcus Jonsson continues. The GPS jammer affecting aircraft around Estonia is located in Russia. As mentioned, sorry, I already said that, but he's repeated the same bit. But you can see the effect there is pretty sizable. This is a more zoomed in view of the likeliest position of GPS jammer. So it's trying to pinpoint it. This is Estonia over here. So we're going on the way to St. Petersburg. So it's going to be somewhere around here. Probably, I think I would have thought that yellow one is most likely, maybe. Most likeliest point of the GPS jammer operating around Estonia, and recently famous for causing the brand new Helsinki-Tartu flight line to cease operating. So he's looked into this. He says, I should add the jammer over Estonia is very different in scope and temporal profile. A higher proportion of aircraft are affected around Estonia, and a jammer is always on. So there you go. This is a continuous problem. Absolutely not cool. Jane Kiev says probably pure coincidence that Russians are jamming GPS in exactly the areas that one might want to jam if one were interested in complicating NATO's task of saving Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia during a Russian invasion. So something to bear in mind there. Right, moving on to other geopolitical things. Somebody said, why haven't you talked about this? And I was aware of it, but sometimes things just... it doesn't register as serious as it really is. And then I was like, yeah, why haven't I talked about this? This is super serious. Anyway, over the last few days, Macron has been talking about opening the debate as to kind of using France in the EU as a nuclear deterrent, not just for France. And France's military strategy is centered around there being a nuclear power. So they are the only nuclear power now that the UK is out of the EU, within the EU. And as a result, they have something to offer in terms of security for the rest of the trade bloc or the rest of the political bloc. This Politico article says Macron wants to open the debate on European nuclear deterrent as he gets tougher on Russia. French president urges discussion of the idea of using France's nuclear warheads to defend the EU. French President Emmanuel Macron said he is willing to discuss using French nuclear warheads as part of a, quote, credible European defence against threats from Russia. I suppose, look, if you have nuclear warheads because they have value to you and for you, and the nations in your pact are valuable to you, that pact is valuable, then you would naturally want to share that. For example, if I've got, I don't know, a light that goes off outside my house because it senses movement, I can say to my neighbours, "You go, I like you guys. We get on, yeah. We're sort of a pact, right? If I put my light up here, it can actually cover all of our properties, all three of our properties. I mean, you're stretching the analogy. Would you like me to do that for you guys, to switch the sensor so it covers your plots of land as much as it covers mine?" And if my neighbours will be like, "Well, yeah, it's valuable for you. You get value out of using that. And actually, we don't have that. So that'd be really cool. And it actually protects all of our buildings here from being attacked by burglars or whatever." I'll say, "Oh, it's brilliant. I'll have a bottle of wine for that. That's fine. It's cool." So there may be a bit of exporting that security is what I'm trying to say. That's kind of how it is. This seems eminently sensible to me, as long as you trust those in the EU. You're all part of the same pact where you are aiming towards common goals and objectives. I'm in favour of opening this debate, which has to include missile defence, long-range weapons firing, nuclear weapons for those who have it or who have American nuclear weapons on their soil, Macron said in an interview with regional outlets from the Ebra Press Group published late Saturday. There might be something here to do with power plays on this 4D game of global chess here. Global game of 4D chess. So the US has nuclear weapons on European nations, or is offering their security, and we know that France is trying to make EU more security independent, is trying to shed the influence of the US away from, France would like to replace the US in terms of what the US does for Europe, and this could be part of that. So there's lots going on here potentially. Quote, "France will keep its specificity but is ready to contribute more to the defence of European soil," he added. France, which has about 300 nuclear warheads, is the only nuclear power in the European Union. The French president has in recent weeks adopted an increasingly tougher stance against Russia over its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This is not the first time he suggested using France's nuclear weapons for EU defence. Macron first hinted at the possible move in 2020, when he called for a strategic dialogue on the role of France's nuclear deterrent in Europe's collective security, in an attempt to open discussions on the issue with Germany, which hosts US nuclear weapons on its soil. France then repeated the offer in 2022. So far, Berlin hasn't taken the French president up on his offer. So there's that bit of tension between France and Germany, as they're both vying to be top dogs in Europe, possibly. So, there's been that relationship between Germany and the US since the Second World War, and military bases on German soil, US military bases. So, yeah, lots going on, but I think that's an interesting discussion to be had there. And there is a lot to be said for European security unity in light of Russia's activities over the last couple of years, right? Okay. Ukraine holds a third round of negotiations with the US on bilateral security agreements. So they've done lots of security agreements with lots of other countries. Now, of course, the US is a major one that still needs to be thought through and sorted out. The Ukrainian team, led by the head of presidential office, Andriy Yermak, held the third round of negotiations with the US on a bilateral security deal yesterday. And Putin, let's listen to a bit of Antony Blinken here, speaking about Ukraine. We'll make sure that it is loud enough for y'all. Okay.
Then it was likely that would-be aggressors everywhere would take note, and we would have a world of more conflict, not less conflict. And having brought many countries together effectively, we helped the incredibly courageous Ukrainians repel the aggression. Now, it's an ongoing effort, an ongoing struggle, but the designs that Vladimir Putin had on Ukraine to begin with, to erase it from the map, to subsume it into Russia so that it no longer existed, that's failed. And we also have an alliance in Europe that's stronger, that's also larger than it was, and I think a plan to enable Ukraine to be a success over time, a strong country militarily, economically, democratically. In Asia, we have the most consequential and in many ways complicated relationship with China. It can't be defined in a bumper sticker, but we've approached it from a position of strength. The aspects where we're competitive, the aspects where we're cooperative, the aspects where we're contesting.
Interesting. Be something to watch going forward. The cooperative and contested areas and competitive areas between the US and China. He's just been over in China trying to twist their arms in terms of the support they give to Russia and the ramifications for continued support to Russia. In light of how difficult it is to get things done, clearly in line with morality, everything's always compromised, isn't it? There's always compromise, and one is always compromised to some degree. Biden, the Jankiv is quite rhetorical here as ever. Biden again bows to Putin, removing sanctions on Russian banks. Seems in an effort to lower energy prices. Never be shocked by Western weakness because it always gets worse. I was talking to my friend on Facebook about this earlier, who was raging about, he was calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe. I was like, you've got to understand that Biden's approach to Gaza is very different to, say, the Republicans. Like, if you didn't have the Democrats in charge at the moment, there would have been much more overt support through the Republicans, through that the long-standing relationship between the US and Israel, and it wouldn't, Biden's Democratic Party or his electorate, the base, is very much split on Israel. So you have the progressives who definitely don't want US aid to go to Israel, and they want Palestinians to get humanitarian aid and there to be a solution forthcoming. And you've got maybe Democrats on the right of the party saying, actually, we support Israel. And in the Republicans, you've generally got most people supporting Israel. I'm simplifying here. And what I was saying to my mate earlier is that, look, you might call Joe Biden Genocide Joe, but he is someone who doesn't like Netanyahu. We've heard this. He's been hot-mic'd. We know he doesn't like Netanyahu. He doesn't like what the Israelis are doing, and he wants them to stop. And he has been putting pressure on recently, and they are conditioning aid, or moving towards conditioning aid, which means that you can only have aid if we know what's going on with what you're doing and we get to appraise what you're doing, and it's only used defensively, and that you also definitely assure that humanitarian aid gets to the Palestinians, etc., etc. That probably might not have happened had the GOP been in charge. But what you've got to understand from Biden is that it's the long-term view, or anyone. This is a conversation about politics in general. You can argue this with the Labour Party. So Jeremy Corbyn didn't get in with the left with going further to the left with the Labour Party. He had his ideals. He's very idealistic in what he wanted. But in order to get into power, you have to appeal to the centre ground. He went to the left. The centrist Labour supporters actually flipped to Lib Dems or Conservative in the UK, and he wasn't able to get in. So you can be as idealistic as you want on either end of the political spectrum. You have these really strong ideals, but if you don't have enough people supporting you, you will never get to affect government by implementing your ideals and enacting policy and law that reflects those ideals. You have to get into power first. And when you do get into power, you have found that the people who have brought you into power are a broad church, because you had to appeal to the centre as well as your idealists. And so therefore you are in a difficult situation whereby, actually, I want to do this one thing, and if I do this one thing, I'll lose this part of my party or support and gain and keep this part. And if I do the other thing, I lose this part and gain that part. So keep that part. So what do I do? So Biden is here personally not a fan of Netanyahu, personally not a fan of what Israel is doing in terms of the killing of people in Gaza. But there's historically been a connection of the US government. There's bilateral agreements that go on between Israel and the US. And that he knows if he's really hard on Netanyahu, he will lose maybe a lot of people in the center, who will then go, well, actually, we're really behind Israel here, And it might be a leftover from the war on terror and 9/11 and people being broadly anti-Islamic and therefore thinking, well, this is a fight between, fundamentalist Islam and Judeo-Christianity. That I think that's going to be how many people are translating what's going on in Israel, for right or wrong, right? And Biden's having to navigate this and think, I need to get elected in November. And if I go hard on Israel and give them a hard time and go totally to what I believe in my head, I think Biden, on the one hand, does have a strong connection to Israel, but on the other hand, is not a fan of Netanyahu's right-wing, super right-wing government. So politically, he wants to be hard on Israel, but he knows if he does that, he will not get elected in November. And this is what you got to understand about all these kind of decisions. So something like this, and this annoys me, but I guess there's all sorts of lobbying going on, money swapping hands, and this is to do with energy as well. So this, I don't fully understand this, but you've got the Foreign Assets Control, Office of Foreign Assets Control, releasing the Russian harmful foreign activities sanctions regulations, and it looks like they are letting off certain sanctions that are to do with energy extraction, production, refinement, liquefaction, blah, 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 all this stuff. And they are letting sanctions off the Central Bank of Russia, Russian Federation, and all of these banks here. Where you're like, what are you doing? And I had this conversation to my mate this morning, saying, look, here's an example of how compromised people are in government. So you've got the situation, and I know this might not definitely be going on because of the global marketplace for hydrocarbons might not be affected by the oil refineries getting hit. But this is a sort of calculation that might be going on, which is that Ukraine does a really good job, blows up oil depots, oil refinery places, oil transportation places, screws over the Russian ability to either extract, process, or transport oil or refined oil products. That then either affects massive companies that are operating in the area that are American concerns, like ExxonMobil, like Chevron, or it affects global prices, or both, affects global prices of hydrocarbons, either in their crude form or in their refined form. And that then affects the prices of everything because everything uses energy and you get a lot of energy from hydrocarbons. So that affects then the prices of foodstuffs and everything else goes up, and then the prices at the gas station go up. Now, we know that inflation is a massive component of electorate voting thinking, right? So when it comes to a November election, if the prices start going up at the petrol pump, people are going to blame the Biden government for that. It's a classic thing. Inflation, you blame the government. You don't look at global things. It's your fault, and you're going to get done over that. So Biden needs to control the price of gas and the price of hydrocarbons in his country if he wants to get elected. It's going to be a tight election, and if something like that goes wrong, its economy is such a huge variable in voting, so he needs to control that. So he's then making these decisions that on the face of it are going to benefit Russia, certainly, in terms of making money out of hydrocarbons. So then they go and pressure Ukraine and say, don't hit these refineries because actually we won't get elected in. And the reason why that's important is because I would argue if Ukraine wants sustained help from the US, they need the Democrats to get voted back in. They need a Democrat trifecta. And so they're looking at that going, right, we really want to destroy the refineries. America doesn't want us to destroy the refineries for political reasons to do with getting re-elected, but that's realpolitik, right? This is where the thing is, I have this view that I've got this ideal as a political party or as a politician, and I want to enact that in my laws, but I need to get elected in to enact that. I need this broad coalition of people, and I can't enact that unless I get voted in. So I have to have power first. Power first, policy second. It's all about getting elected. You can have whatever you like on your manifesto, but generally you will put on your manifesto what you think people want to get elected, and then you change your manifesto. That's realpolitik. Get in, then make your changes. Right, so the Democrats saying we ain't going to get elected if there's hydrocarbon nightmares going on. So then Ukraine are going, right, I know we really want to hammer the refineries, but actually even more we want continued support from the US. So it's actually worth us not hitting the refineries and hitting other things. Might hit the odd refinery, but predominantly trying to hit more overt military targets. Please the Americans, Democrats get voted in, and then we hit the refineries because they've then got 4 years and hopefully a trifecta, and then we can just go nuts on the refineries and get some more aid from the US. So these sort of things, we will complain about political decisions, but there are so many things going on under the bonnet that we don't really recognise, and it's important to say that. So this sucks. Like this sucks that sanctions are being let off the Russian Central Bank of the Russian Federation. But you can rest assured that there's a reason for that. That's what I always say to you. There will be a reason underneath. Whether you think that's a good enough reason, I don't know. We can have that argument. But they won't have done that for just shits and giggles. That is done because somebody wants to stay in power, or it might just be beneficial for the American economy in general and not electioneering. But I can guarantee most things are going to be seen through the prism of the November elections at the moment. Hopefully I've explained myself. I'm conflicted on stuff like this because I think that sucks. That completely sucks and it's counterproductive. But I also understand you need to get elected. The United Arab Emirates and Ukraine have signed a joint statement of economic partnership. The countries reached agreements on liberalisation of access to both goods and services markets and laid the groundwork for deepening cooperation in trade and investment. This is really good news because UAE is one of those countries that helps out Russia quite a bit in components and whatnot that find their way to Russia. Duchess of Edinburgh, so Sophie she's married to Prince Edward, I think the other one, isn't it? She has found a way to Ukraine. This is good. I'm not the biggest monarchist, but actually I love it when people use their power and influence for the good of humanity. And no matter what that is, that power and influence they have. And it's really good that Ukraine gets people from all sorts of walks of life, whether it's a pop star or a royal or a politician or a poet or a writer. This is so important. So she's gone over to demonstrate solidarity with the women, men and children impacted by the war. In fact, she's looking, so during a visit, the wife of Prince Edward met the victims of sexual violence and torture and visited Bucha. So she's the first representative of the British royal family since 2014. So that's excellent there. Now, talking about people who use their power and influence for bad because they have a completely skewed moral compass, let's go to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson interviewed Alexander Dugin, the creator of the ideology of the Russian world. Tucker decided to be inspired by the Russian world. Goodness me. So Alexander Dugin, I mean, if you look at his description here, Alexander Dugin is the most famous political philosopher in Russia. His ideas are considered so dangerous, the Ukrainian government murdered his daughter. No. He was so dangerous that the Ukrainian government tried to assassinate him and he switched cars and his daughter was killed. There's a slight difference there. And you can argue against assassination, but I wonder if you would have argued against the assassination of Osama bin Laden, for example. Or not. Alexander Dugin is, some people would say, the most dangerous man in Russia. Some people say not so much. It's overblown. His fingerprints are all over Putin's essay from 2020 or whatever, that big 7,000 word essay he wrote on basically Ukraine sucks and we want it as part of our Ruski Mir type thing. Anyway, and Tucker complains that Amazon won't sell his books. We talked to him in Moscow because you're morally compromised, Tucker. That's why. This is the sort of guy that says, this is Alexander Dugin speaking, today's Ukrainians are a race of degenerates that crawled up from the sewage. Genocide is in order. That's who Tucker Carlson is saying, oh, poor Dugin. Oh. Sort it out, Tucker. So Pekka Kalyoniemi says, Tucker has outdone himself again, not in a good way, by interviewing Russian imperialist and fascist Alexander Dugin. He claims that Dugin is not either a military leader or politician, but leaves out the part that for a long time, Dugin's 1997 book, Foundation of Geopolitics, was required reading for Russian military leaders. The book is basically a blueprint for the Kremlin's imperialistic plans. Carlson also states that Dugin's daughter was murdered, allegedly by the Ukrainians, but leaves out the bit where she was heavily involved in Kremlin's propaganda machinery with her father. He also forgot to mention that Dugin has called for the genocide in Ukraine, and of course the bit where it was thought that they swapped cars. which is why that car was blown up and not the one he was in. I agree with Tucker on one thing, though. Dugin's books shouldn't be banned. They should be studied instead so that more people would understand Russian imperialism and thirst for conquering. So that's what he has to say. We have another note. There was one more thing on Dugin. I thought, no, okay. So we go on to just Pekka again talking about just Russia in general. And this is, in answer to the Financial Times article about Western banks in Russia paying $800 million in euros in taxes to Kremlin last year. And he says, Russia invades a country at the heart of Europe, completely demolishing its cities and killing its civilian population, assassinates people in European countries with painful nerve agents and radioactive substances, sabotages European weapons factories, runs a sophisticated spy and illegal network around Europe, more on that in a second, interferes with elections and provokes civil unrest, uses GPS jamming against civilian planes, sabotages Europe's energy infrastructure, sends waves of immigrants who were probably joined by spies and agents provocateurs to the EU, bribes European politicians so that they promote pro-EU Kremlin narratives for local audiences, spreads propaganda and disinformation on a massive scale, nationalizes Western companies and equipment worth billions of euros, and I would add, has committed over 100,000 registered war crimes. And Europe says we should do more business and pay more taxes to Russia. That's his point there. So he's pretty angry, evidently and obviously, about that. Now, we're okay. We'll come back to that in a second, actually. We'll go, because I think it's better segueing into this. So, in line with what Pekka Kallioniemi was just saying, a big story has come out in The Insider, which talks about a hotel in northern Greece. So, two deep cover Russian GRU spies lived for decades as Czech citizens under fake cover identities while orchestrating bombings and poisonings across Europe. And this comes from the Insider. Villa Elena, a 3-story hotel in Frama, Halkidiki, northern Greece, boasts a large outdoor swimming pool, gazebo, private garden, not to mention sprawling grounds. Even in the interior, if the interior, all loud greens and purples and gold-rimmed cabinets, looks hopelessly post-Soviet, the amenities include foam pillows, hair dryers and bathrobes. One could do worse for $155 a night, but Nikolai and Elena Sapoznikov, for whom the pillared pile on the Aegean is named, are no ordinary hoteliers. They are Russian illegals or spies operating outside of diplomatic cover who spent decades living under false pretenses as naturalized citizens of Czechia. And Villa Elena is no ordinary hotel. For the last 15 years, it served as a Greek safe house for members of the GRU Unit 29155, Vladimir Putin's most grimly accomplished assassination and sabotage squad, the one responsible for poisoning enemies of the Kremlin and blowing up material stored in Czechia and Bulgaria, both NATO countries, before it could be sent to the Georgian and Ukrainian armies, as well as Western-backed Syrian rebels. All of these end users were variously squaring off against Russian forces or threatening to overthrow an important Russian client. In fact, the Sapoznikovs abetted those bombings, which the Insider first exposed as work of the Unit 29155. Right, so next to then say of this, a Czech investigation has confirmed that the 2014 explosions at weapons depots in the village of Repetice were carried out by members of Russian military intelligence. The aim was to prevent the delivery of weapons and ammunition to areas where the Russian army was conducting its operations, primarily Syria and Ukraine. This was stated by the head of the National Centre for Combating Organised Crime and Police in the Czech Republic. At the same time, the police had to close the case because Russia refused to cooperate with the Czech investigation. The police report does not mention the names of the GRU officers, but earlier investigators named Anatoly Chapiga and Alexander Mishkin. Britain believes they were the ones involved in the 2018 poisoning of former Soviet spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Salisbury, just down the road from me. So this is, like, it's all kind of linked, but Russia's just been going around Europe for decades, like killing and sabotaging and getting up to no good, where we just kind of sit back and helplessly watch them and kind of pretend to do the odd sanction here and there. Absolutely nuts. Again, this is talked about by Anton Gerashchenko. At the same time, Russian opposition online newspaper The Insider published a large investigation that indicates that the bombing was, so that's one at the facility, the ammunition depot in Czechia, facilitated by Czech citizens, the Shepoznikov, couple Elena and Mikhail, who were indeed Russian intelligence. They passed intelligence to Russian military and helped to carry out the bombing of GRU agents Chapika and Mishkin, who for this mission received documents under the names Ruslan Tabarov and Nikolai Popper. They're known as Bashirov and Petrov and are suspected of the poisoning of Sergei Skripal with Novichok, and became known after claiming to have travelled to Salisbury to see the local spy. So that's in reference to, they then weirdly went on TV, and it was not Skabieva, it was Margarita Simonyan who interviewed them, was kind of harsh on them. It was a really interesting interview where they said, surely, you weren't going on holiday to the Salisbury to see the spy. And they basically read off Wikipedia in their heads. Oh, we went to see the famous Salisbury spy, which, as you know, is 148 meters high. Blah, blah, blah. They literally just read Wikipedia and then splurged it on TV to try and give a cover for going. They were caught on CCTV. They went to Skripal's house, put Novichok on the doorknob, and then went away. Did no sightseeing really. One day, no one goes from kind of Russia to Salisbury for a day and then goes back and it says, "Oh, we went sightseeing to the Salisbury Cathedral." Like, no, it's not what happened. And then, to make matters worse, an officer in the German army, the Bundeswehr, who is a party member of the AfD, the right-wing and pro-Russian AfD party, has now confessed he spied for Russia. So it's just getting worse in Europe. That Russia have their fingers, their insidious tendrils, burrowing their way into European politics, into the political landscape. And unfortunately, their runners are growing these new twisted plants that are having a poisonous effect on the lands in which they grow. It's really horrific. Russia sucks is my way of translating that. And von der Leyen realises this, and she's criticised the European far right for being Putin's proxies. So the Commission President, who's seeking another term, took aim at the group that includes the AfD and National Rally in a pre-election debate. So she's also running to be re-elected for a second 5-year term in leading the European Commission. And at a debate in Maastricht on Monday with rivals from across the political spectrum, von der Leyen went on the attack against the far-right Identity and Democracy group in the European Parliament, which unites France's National Rally, the Alternative für Deutschland, and Danish People's Party. The ID group is expected to make significant gains in the pan-European vote in June, and could even become the third largest force, threatening key EU policies such as support for Ukraine, climate action, and enlargement. This is how important the elections are. You will get people voting for these based on things like immigration, but they will be handing European power to Putin. Be handing European power to Putin. Addressing the far-right representative Danish People's Party Anders Vistisen, von der Leyen accused his allies in the AfD of being supporters of Russia's President Putin, saying their electoral programme echoed, quote, the lies and propaganda of Putin. It's very important that we should not be distracted from the real problem, and these are the proxies of Putin and who tried to destroy from within with disinformation and polarisation. And we see an example here tonight, von der Leyen said, gesturing to Vistisen. So there you go. Yes, lots more to say about that, but it is on the lips of people like von der Leyen. It is in the minds of many of us who are super, super worried about the growing influence of Russia on our national and international politics. A key insurer has come out to say that Russia's oil price cap is increasingly unenforceable. Just 16% of Russian oil flows had IG cover in April. Moscow is moving its fleet away from Western oversight, which means that basically hardly any of their oil transport is falling under the remit of the oil price cap. So it means that 84% of the oil that they transport is just done through shadow tankers and in other ways that is not beholden to the price cap, and they're getting loads of money for it. How do we do something about that? I don't know how easy or how difficult. I assume it's just very difficult to try and police that. Belarus is forming military brigades with school students where they are taught to hate the Baltic states and Poland. Earlier, a Yale University study found that 2,400 Ukrainian children were deported by Russian troops to Belarus as of 2023, and they are being brainwashed. The young are being brainwashed in Belarus in pro-Russian ways. The legal committee of the Georgian parliament supported the draft law on foreign agents in the second reading. This is terrible stuff because, listen to this, Georgian media reported that the chairman of the parliament removed almost all opposition MPs and representatives of non-governmentals or non-governmental organisations from the session hall before the vote. And there you go. That's autocracy. That's dictatorship on the way there. Georgia. I mean, I had someone in the thread saying that they've been to every single protest in Georgia, in Tbilisi, and that they thanked me for like talking about this. Please let me know all of your experiences. If you ever want to come on and be interviewed about your experiences of what's going on in Georgia and how you feel as a Georgian, please reach out to me. This is incredibly challenging because this is Georgia trying to move toward EU sphere of influence and have their ideals and objectives aligned towards Western ideals and objectives, rather than being pulled back into the orbit of Russia, which is what their ruling party Georgia Dream is doing, and not allowing opposition MPs to vote on to be in there for the vote. I mean, it's just disgraceful. So that's a real concern. On Monday, Tajikistan handed over a note of protest to the Russian ambassador in Dushanbe, Semyon Grigoriev. The note stated serious concern regarding, quote, mass cases of expressly negative attitude towards citizens of the Republic of Tajikistan on the territory of the Russian Federation, as well as widespread violation of their rights and freedoms. This is because, of course, Russia has had the Crocus City Hall massacre, and the Tajiks have been seen as responsible for that, and so they've received an awful lot of pushback from Russians. Bloomberg is reporting that Macron hopes to convince President Xi in China to sway Putin toward ending invasion of Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron is seeking to deepen his personal connections with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping to contribute to ending Russia's full-scale invasion there. And the Chinese president will begin his 5-day trip to France, Serbia, and Hungary. How interesting. So this is how important Macron possibly is in trying to sway Xi Jinping away from influencing Serbia and Hungary, and shows you how the Balkans are being subsumed into Chinese way of thinking. Hungary is looking east and not west. Serbia is, I don't know, democratically done for, you could argue. And when you look at, as I showed you earlier, when you look at Russian monthly imports of key military goods, it was kind of negligible from the whole world, and then a little bit from China at the beginning of 2023, and then bang, they're getting absolutely tons of military imports from both the rest of the world and largely China. What do we do about it? Anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.